Hi, everybody. This video is meant to give you a basic understanding of news. I'm going to talk about what makes news, what qualifies as news, and how to determine whether or not something is news. I'll start off with a few quotes, just to kind of some newsroom quotes. First one is, "When a dog bites a man, that's not news, but when a man bites a dog, that is news." News is what somebody somewhere wants to suppress. All the rest is advertising. News is anything that's interesting, that relates to what's happening in the world, what's happening in the areas of culture that would be of interest to your audience. News is anything that makes a reader say, gee whiz, or better yet, holy shit. News is a first rough draft of history. And for most folks, no news is good news, but for the press, good news is not news. All right, so those are sort of some newsroom insider ways of looking at news. Basically, what news is it's information, it's developments that are new, that happened recently, that are unusual or interesting and significant, and ultimately they're always about people. So if it's not news, it can't be news. Um, the New York Times can't write a story today saying that Trump won the election in 2016 because we already know that it happened 5 years ago, and it's not news, right? A better example might be if we were to run a story on the front page of the paper that humans have accomplished the impossible. They've landed on the moon. Well, of course, that's not news because happened 50 years ago. But if all of a sudden there was a development that showed that we actually didn't go to the moon, that it was all fake, which is a conspiracy that some people believe, that would be big news. So it's new. It happened recently. Unusual. News isn't about stuff that just happens every day and is mundane. Nobody's going to write a story saying that people walked up and down Broadway without incident because the sidewalks were available for them and because the pedestrian lights worked. No, that's not news. But if there's a bunch of construction downtown that makes it impossible for people to get through, that's news. That's something that happened recently and it's unusual. It's not something that's expected. Here's an example that I might give. City councils, government bodies meet and talk about a bunch of different things. And most of that stuff is not newsworthy. So if the city council say approves a liquor license for a restaurant, that might not be news unless it's a really kind of interesting restaurant or that sort of thing. But restaurants get liquor licenses all the time. But if the city council approved a liquor license to a restaurant that's owned by a man convicted multiple times of serving alcohol to minors, that's news. That's unusual. It's interesting. It's alarming, and it's significant. More about interesting here too. I'm going to talk about some of my experience. It has to be interesting. It can't be just boring stuff that people don't really care about. An example I have is when I was a reporter for a newspaper in Kansas City, I heard that there was a group of men who had formed a militia to battle the rising socialism and American government and that sort of thing. And at the time, militias were, as they are now, kind of a big story in the world. It was not long after the Oklahoma City bombing, which had connections to militias and that sort of thing. So I thought I had a good story. But then when I went and talked to the people, I found out that it was a small group. It was mostly kind of nerdy guys that wanted to be tough guys, and they would just sort of do exercises in the woods, and it really didn't amount to anything. So when I took it to my editor, they're like, no, that's not very interesting. That's not good news. We're not going to go with that. And then lastly, is it significant? Will it impact your readers? It has to be something that is significant. And let's just look here for a second at some of the stuff we might see in the newspaper. Here's the newspaper for the Ledger Inquirer. Let's see, just based on the headlines, if these things are significant. Phoenix City police charge suspect in shooting that left 2 dead. Yes, that's significant. When murders happen in our community and the police arrest them, that is significant and important to talk about. Sturgeon tagged 14 years ago, recaptured in Georgia River, and it was double the size. I guess that would be significant to people who are fishers. I don't know, fishermen. That's a kind of a, I'm not sure that, but maybe that's just not my kind of news. Remember, you have to give news that is appealing to a lot of different people. Sheriff's captain in Georgia dies weeks after contracting COVID. He was a fighter. That's a significant thing. A law enforcement officer in our community caught this deadly disease that's raging, and it cost him his life. So, all right, and then let's move on now. Stopping the screen share, there's me again. You want to ask yourself always, how do would these stories affect my readers' lives, right? That's one of your ways of gauging the significance of things. Some other things to think about regarding news. One is the target audience. Every publication has a specific target audience that it's going for. So for the Ledger Inquirer, it's generally going to be defined by its readership area. So it's going to be of interest. It's going to be stories of interest to this region. You're not going to see stories about Birmingham here necessarily, and certainly not about, you know, Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, or some far-flung place that has nothing to do with here. They're going to focus on things that happen in this county, in these two counties areas, and in the states that oversee them. And then, of course, there's some national news. Every news story should answer 4 essential questions, and ideally 5. Who, what, where, when, how, and why. That's actually 5 or 6. Who, what, when, where, and why, and how. A story should answer all those questions. I'm going to stop here and move all that on to the next video, which is going to be about how to write a news story.